Hello, my darling viewers, and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Miranda, and I'm the Enchantress of Avalon. So for this week's video, I've decided that we will be covering another favorite topic of mine that I just haven't covered enough. I've never done a video on it, and I've only written a little bit about this subject on my blog, but it probably comes as no surprise that I am a huge Alice in Wonderland fan. I'm obsessed with everything fairy lore and fantasy and the fantastical. So of course I love this story. Now, there are two really iconic children's stories from the Victorian period and then the turn of the century that feature a female protagonist going to this magical land. The first is Alice in Wonderland. We're covering that today. And the second is, of course, The Wizard of Oz. And I've come to realize that you probably fall into one of two camps. Either you're an Alice person or you're a Wizard of Oz person. While I like The Wizard of Oz a great deal, it doesn't have the same impact for me that the Alice story always has. I've been an Alice girl from the very beginning. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you are more Alice or more Wizard of Oz. I'm wondering. All right, so I'm just going to go over some bullet points of different versions of the story because it has been done so many times. There is the original novel, obviously. Novels, there's two of them. There's obviously Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and then Alice Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll, whose real name was Charles Dodson. He was a mathematician, an amateur photographer, and a novelist. And when he was writing novels, he went by the pseudonym Lewis Carroll. Then in 1951, Disney made their iconic adaptation. It's probably the one that people are most familiar with, is the Disney 1951 film. Alice as the little blonde girl, the blue dress, the white apron. This is probably what we picture when we picture Alice. In 1966, the BBC created this Alice. It's Alice in Wonderland, and it was starring Peter Sellers, John Gielgud, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Michael Redgrave, Peter Cook, and Leo McKern as the male characters in the film. I don't know if I have a listing for the little girl that played Alice, but she was absolutely adorable. And Ravi Shankar, who is a great sitar player, lent kind of psychedelic music for this version. And uniquely to any of the other versions, no one is wearing makeup that makes them look like animals, even though they are portraying animals. We're just meant to acknowledge that, oh, this is the White Rabbit's role, this is the Cheshire Cat's role, etc. So it's really interesting. It's this little made-for-TV film, again, done in 1966, and it's only 71 minutes long, so if you can get your hands on it, or if you have some sort of streaming with the BBC, I highly recommend viewing this. I had to purchase it on DVD because I don't have any of the streaming, but it's very adorable. All right, and after that, there is the Hallmark made-for-TV movie that came out in 1999. I think Hallmark's done other ones in other eras, but the 1999 one is the one I grew up with and really love. It's got a bunch of stars in the cast playing different characters in Wonderland, and it's just so beautifully well done. And it always makes me super happy watching and rewatching that one when I get a chance to. It's so fun. And Miranda Richardson as the Queen of Hearts is just, or I don't remember if she was called the Queen of Hearts or the Red Queen in that, but she was just fabulous in that role. Very shrill, and it's everything you want from that particular adaptation. And it's, again, just a made-for-TV movie, but very well done. Then, of course, we come to the Tim Burton films. In 2010, Tim Burton did his first Disney adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, and then, of course, followed up by a sequel. These are pretty popularly disliked amongst Alice fans. I'm not a huge fan of either of them. I'll watch them. I have watched both of them more than once, but they're not my favorite adaptations of the Alice story. And I'm pretty much only watching them because I do like Johnny Depp's portrayal of the Mad Hatter. I think he did a really excellent job at lending even some gravitas to the Hatter's story. But I think one of the issues is the focusing a little too much on the Hatter when he's not the protagonist, and also the fact that people wanted him and Alice romantically together, largely because of these films, kind of makes me uncomfortable. This so not the story of Alice in Wonderland. Then in 2013, Once Upon a Time in Wonderland premiered, which is a spin-off set within the Once Upon a Time universe, the television show universe. That was a 13 episode long season. It was just one season. It was a complete story told over 13 episodes. And I loved the way they were able to entwine all the different fairy tales into Alice in Wonderland. And the Wonderland setting was really fun. I was very pleased with that adaptation. It's actually a favorite of mine amongst different adaptations, especially ones that take a twist on the story. I really like how that one was done. And then I will also note that in the 7th and final season of Once Upon a Time, they did have an Alice character that was a different Alice character than the Once Upon a Time in Wonderland Alice, because if you're familiar with Once Upon a Time, there's a lot of different universes within it that kind of overlap. Very much so these fairy realms that are overlapping into one another. So, like, there are multiple Alice in Wonderlands. There are multiple Sleeping Beauty. No, not Sleeping Beauty. There's multiple Cinderellas. There's multiple Rapunzels. Those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. Obviously, also Cinderella stepsisters by extent are also, there's multiples of. It's a very complex series. So I didn't dislike the Alice in the 7th season. Actually, she was one of the highlights for me in the 7th season of Once Upon a Time because I wasn't a big fan of it. I adore the first 6 seasons wholeheartedly. But the 7th season for me, I feel like it didn't really need to happen because the first 6 seasons told Emma's story and it came to a close. If you wanted to do a sequel series that then covered the next chapters, that would be one thing. But just lumping it in as a 7th season of an already really beloved show with the central character only making a couple guest appearances ended up being kind of lackluster, even though you had other beloved characters still there. There were things I liked. I loved getting to see Regina's final conclusion. She totally deserved it. That was amazing. I loved getting to see the glimpses of Emma and Hook in like the future. That was awesome. And like I said, I did like the way they worked in Alice in Wonderland. Those were the things I liked about that season. And then I'm just going to very briefly mention American McGee's Alice. It is a video game that came out back in, I think the first one was like in 2000. I don't know a lot. I've only known what I've been told by people who've played the game and what I've seen on like YouTube videos talking about the game. It's a game I would be interested in playing, even though I don't play video games, just because of the Alice in Wonderland, and it's the really dark, twisted take on Alice. Super interesting. And then we have the Alice in Wonderland ballet. Did you know they made an Alice in Wonderland ballet? They did. And this was the Royal Opera House, the Royal Ballet. And this is such a beautiful and incredible ballet. I've never actually found it streaming anywhere, so I do still have my DVD copy of it. And I've actually loaned it out to people who are fans of ballet and fans of Alice. Super non-traditional, super spectacular because it is Alice in Wonderland. It's a big spectacle. And it's just so beautifully done. And then the final adaptation I wanted to mention in this video is the Ever After High adaptation, because Ever After High is a series of dolls, which are also a television series. They've done a bunch of different little specials and episodes, and they have 5 characters that are Wonderland characters whose children are in this line. There is Alistair Wonderland, the son of Alice. He's the only boy. There's Bunny Blanc, the daughter of the White Rabbit. There is Lizzie Hearts, the daughter of the Queen of Hearts. Kitty Cheshire, the daughter of the Cheshire Cat, obviously. And then my favorite, she's actually a mainstay of the series of dolls and of the series. That it's on Netflix if you want to watch it. The cartoon specials. And that is Maddie Hatter, the daughter of the Mad Hatter. Who doesn't love the Mad Hatter and who doesn't want to see what his daughter is like? She's fantastic. And this has such an influential story that it's even made its way into other mediums other than books and visual mediums. One of my favorite songs of all time, certainly my favorite song by this band, is White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane on their 1967 Summer of Love masterpiece, Surrealistic Pillow. It was, of course, written by Grace Slick, who was the lead singer of the band, and it's both about Alice in Wonderland, but obviously also about a drug trip. But let's face it, Lewis Carroll probably was on something when he wrote Alice in Wonderland. It's very fantastical and very crazy. And on a personal note, I actually was such a huge have always been such a huge fan of Alice in Wonderland that when I graduated college, I decided I wanted to decorate my cap because that was a thing. I don't know if it's still a thing, but it was a thing when I graduated college. And I did a Alice in Wonderland motif on my cap. It was a motif of like the different Alice in Wonderland aesthetics, and it had the white rabbit, and I had the words "follow the white rabbit" in, or other words, going into the next phase of life, the next adventure. So, yeah. And the final thing I want to talk about is the fact that I have always viewed Alice in Wonderland as a fairy realm. And this may be kind of surprising to some people, and it may be really obvious to others. But while we don't know that Wonderland is like a real fairy realm that exists, it has the markers of a fairy realm. It has all these fantastical creatures. It has its own set of rules that greatly differ from the rules of the real world, so that you have to learn when you're there and you have to abide by these rules. It has a queen, or, well, actually it has multiple queens that rule over the realm. Fairy realms are famously ruled more often by queens than by kings. So that to me links it so much already with this aesthetic of being a fairy realm. But it's also this land of dreams and nightmares. And the whole idea of fairies being connected to the sleeping world, to dreams, to nightmares even, is so prevalent in older fairy lore that I think it's not a stretch to call Wonderland a fairy realm. That's probably why I've always loved it so much and why I've always preferred it to other magical realms in children's literature, like I mentioned The Wizard of Oz. But even later, when we get into C.S. Lewis's Narnia, I love Narnia, it's great, but it doesn't feel as fairy as Wonderland does to me. Some people might argue because there are fey creatures obviously in Narnia, but Wonderland has all of these important markers of being a true fairy realm. I've already noted many of them. It's this realm that's run by a queen who has complete dominion. It plays by its own rules that you have to learn and understand. It has crazy fantastical magic. It has these images of creatures behaving as they normally wouldn't. And magical creatures are a huge thing in fairy realms. And often that behavior that is different than a traditional creature of this type is big. And we have all of this in Alice in Wonderland. And even the fact that she gets there by following a white rabbit, signature fairy realm way to get into someplace, because realms of fairy are liminal spaces. So the idea of falling down a rabbit hole is this kind of like liminal thing. But the fact that it's a white rabbit is even more significant because white is often associated with animals of fairy origin. So that's my explanation for why I consider Wonderland a fairy realm. So that has come to the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed me talking about different adaptations of Alice in Wonderland and why I view it as a fairy realm. If you have liked this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and check out my blog, whiteroseofbabylon.life, for even more content. Have a very fabulous week, everyone. Bye now.